What if achieving massive, like truly exponential growth, not just small improvements, was actually simpler and maybe even easier than you've always thought?
It sounds backwards, doesn't it? Because we're all sort of conditioned to think, more effort equals more results. Grind harder.
Exactly. Push, push, push. But the sources we're looking at today really suggest the opposite might be true. Welcome to the Deck Dive. Today we are getting into some really powerful ideas from Dr. Benjamin Hardy's book, 10x is easier than 2x.
And that book leans heavily on the thinking of Dan Sullivan, the legendary entrepreneurial coach.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack why. Why aiming for 10x, 10 times the result, could actually be less complicated than just trying to double things, 2x. And what does that really mean for you, for your work, your life?
We're going to pull out the core concepts, some surprising insights, and real-world examples. The goal is to show you how to shift your thinking, your operations, even your own identity, really, for these exponential results.
And hopefully without feeling completely overwhelmed by the idea of 10x.
Yeah, that's key.
So let's start with this foundational idea, really understanding the difference between 10x and 2x. When we talk 2x, doubling something, it sounds pretty good, right?
Sure. Who wouldn't want double?
But the book defines it as, well, linear, quantitative. It means you're doing the same things you're already doing.
Just more of them. Exactly. You're operating from the past, basically just continuing down the path you're already on.
And it's often tied to that old industrial factory model of time, like the 9 to 5 grind.
Yeah, brute force. Squeezing more out of the existing system, which, let's be honest, often leads to burnout, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Diminishing returns, you hit a ceiling.
Right. It's not really leveraging higher intelligence or real strategic thinking.
Nope. More.
Okay, so that's 2x. But 10x, this is where things get really interesting. The book calls it a qualitative difference, like a wholesale innovation, a complete upgrade.
And they say it's simpler, easier, and better, which just seems counterintuitive. How can a massive 10x leap actually be simpler?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It's because it's a qualitative leap. Think about it like going from crawling to walking, or from not knowing something to actually doing it. It's not about doing 10 times more crawling.
Okay. It's a different mode of operating.
Exactly. And the most fundamental change, it's internal. It's your vision and your identity. When you dramatically expand those, everything else starts to shift to match.
So 10x becomes like a filter.
Yeah, a perceptual filter. Anything that doesn't align with that bigger 10x vision,
Yeah.
you just naturally start to let it go. It falls away.
So it's less about tweaking what you do and more about becoming a different person, operating differently. The book highlights some key pillars for this, right?
It does. Things like dramatically expanding your vision and your standards, simplifying your strategy, really focusing, identifying and ruthlessly removing non-essentials.
Getting rid of the clutter.
Definitely. And developing deep mastery in your unique areas. And crucially, leading and empowering others who buy into that same vision.
There's a really powerful example of this in the book, isn't there? Michelangelo.
Oh, yeah. A fantastic example. Young Michelangelo, just starting his first life-size, three-dimensional sculpture, a huge 9-foot Hercules.
And this was a big deal because before that, his work was smaller, 2D unpaid stuff. This was his first real professional mindset project. A huge 10x jump in ambition.
And the sources say he was desperate, absolutely desperate to understand anatomy with, like, living vibrancy. But getting access to bodies, well, the rich and middle class were off limits.
So what did he do? This is kind of shocking.
He actually considered grave robbing from the poverty fields. He even asked an elderly friend about it. The friend couldn't believe it.
Wow. His target was the unmonitored dead, the very poor, orphans, beggars in church hospitals. That's commitment.
And sacrifice.
Yeah.
He used most of his savings, 5 golden florins, to buy this massive marble block. He even lied to his skeptical father, told him he had a commission, just to get his blessing.
And it wasn't easy, right? He nearly messed up the marble.
Yeah, he almost ruined it, cut too deep near the neck. It just shows how challenging this new level was, even for a future genius.
So the lesson isn't about how much work he did.
No, not at all. It's the quality. It was unfathomable. Each time he went 10x, he reached this almost godlike level of mastery. It shows that 10x is a qualitative leap. It requires a different you. You have to be willing to transform.
Okay, so if 10x means being fundamentally different, a big part of that has to be letting go of the old stuff. This leads us to Dan Sullivan's 10x versus 2x framework, which is all about this.
say 80% of what you're doing now. Just tweak it.
Makes sense. Minor adjustments.
But 10x,
Mhm.
it's so different from where you are now. It requires you to let go of that 80%, the 80% that's actually holding you back, keeping you stuck in the 2x reality.
Letting go of 80%, that sounds huge. Comfortable stuff, familiar stuff. Let's look at Stream Logistics, Carson Holmquist's company.
Yeah, good case study. They grew fast initially, 3 to 30 people doing transportation for construction, but then plateau, linear growth.
Right. Grow revenue 20%, needed 20% more people, and they were basically a commodity service, clients leaving for better deals.
Carson realized they weren't offering unique value, so he dug into the numbers. Profit per shipment. Routine freight was maybe 260, 280 profit,
Okay.
but high-stakes freight, over $700, sometimes way more. That immediately showed where the leverage was.
So they made a massive shift. In 2019, 95% of their clients were that routine stuff.
Yeah, the low-margin work.
By late 2022, less than 25% were. They stopped taking new routine clients altogether. That takes guts.
Huge cuts. But look at the result. Revenue jumped from $22 million to over $36 million. But here is the kicker.
Go on.
The company became over 4 times more profitable with the same 40 employees. They didn't add complexity, they added focus.
Wow, 4 times the profit, same team size, and they still see room to grow 50, 100% more profit with that team.
Exactly. And now they're building 75 massive new trailers for unique loads, addressing a constraint, simplifying by focusing on high value. 10x simplifies, 2x keeps things complex.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? What's my 80%? What's the routine stuff keeping me from the high-stakes opportunities?
Absolutely.
Then there's Linda McKissick's story, another incredible example of these jumps.
Her story is amazing. 1983, her and her husband are $600,000 in debt from a failed restaurant. They went from a mansion to a tiny apartment literally overnight.
Rock bottom.
Right.
So she becomes a real estate agent for Keller Williams, and the office she's in goes from nowhere to #1 in the city.
And she becomes the #1 agent in the whole country, doing hundreds of deals a year, earning huge commissions.
That alone is incredible success. But then comes another 10x jump, right? A different kind.
Yeah. Her franchise owner doesn't renew, but Gary Keller, the founder, approaches her directly. Big opportunity.
So what was her 80-20 shift then?
Her old 20% listing properties being the top agent that became her new 80%, the stuff she had to let go of, delegate. Her new 20%. Recruiting the absolute best agents, building the team.
And the result?
She went from top agent to owning 11 Keller Williams regions, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, 28 offices, 5,000 agents. Her organization did over $14 billion in revenue in 2021.
$14 billion. That's staggering. And the key was?
Each 10x jump, she got better and better who's on her team.
Yeah.
And she focused more and more narrowly on her unique 20%.
This pattern shows up again with Chad, this other example in the sources. He keeps shedding his 80%. Takes fewer clients, but each one is 10x more valuable.
Right. He knew achieving more didn't mean doing more. But it caused friction, didn't it?
Yeah, his 2x clients, the ones happy with the status quo, didn't like him raising his standards. They wanted things to stay the same.
But the 10x clients, they got it. They appreciated his evolution. It shows you might lose some people when you level up.
And the irony is, by cutting out the 80%, the busy work, he actually had more time for the really high-value stuff, like helping clients elevate their vision.
Completely counterintuitive to the always be busy mindset.
One more big example of letting go, Kimberly-Clark. Paper mills were their core business for over a century. That was their 80%.
It's massive. And then CEO Darwin Smith makes this incredibly gutsy call.
He sold them all, even the original mill, to focus entirely on the 20% becoming the best consumer paper products company. Wall Street, the press, they thought he was crazy.
Stupid, they called it. But 25 years later.
#1, beat P&G in most categories, bought Scott Paper. Outperformed the market massively, beating giants like Coke and GE.
The lesson is so clear, you can't be great if you're okay with just being good. Greatness requires committing fully to that 20%, going all in.
Which leads us perfectly into the who not how framework. This seems critical for actually making that 10x leap happen.
It really is. The core idea is simple but powerful. Stop asking, how can I do this?
And start asking,
Who can do this for me? It shifts you from trying to do everything yourself, burning out, to leveraging the genius of others.
Mr. Beast, Jimmy Donaldson, his growth is just phenomenal.
Unbelievable, right? Started making, in his own words, mediocre YouTube videos. Aimed to be #1.
And, well, he pretty much is. At 23, hundreds of millions of subscribers, businesses nearing $1 billion in revenue, huge team. How did the who not how work for him?
He talked about it on Joe Rogan. His strategy was laser focus on his 20%, the creative ideas. Get really, really good at that.
And the rest, the 80%.
Build an amazing team to handle it. Logistics, editing, operations. But here's the genius part. For his team members, those tasks aren't their 80%. He hires pros who love that stuff. It's their 20%, their unique ability.
Ah, that's clever. It's not just offloading chores, it's finding people whose genius matches your needs. James Clear with Atomic Habits is another example.
Absolutely. He focused almost entirely on writing the book. His business basically ran itself because he had the right who's in place. And look at the result, massive global bestseller.
So if you're listening thinking, okay, where do I start with finding who's? What's the first step?
The book suggests often the first most impactful who is an administrative assistant. It's not about luxury. It's about freeing your own mental bandwidth.
Getting the logistical stuff off your plate so you can think creatively?
Exactly. Frank Sinatra didn't move his own pianos, right? You shouldn't be bogged down in tasks others can do, maybe even better.
Every who is an investment then. In your results, your quality of life, your flow.
And the ultimate goal, for many, is training leaders to take over the day-to-day so you can focus purely on expanding the vision.
But what if you hire the wrong person? That feels like a setback.
It happens. The sources say it's normal. The key is the mindset. Be in the gain, not the gap. Learn from it. It usually means you weren't clear enough about what you needed, or maybe you weren't being a great buyer in that situation.
A buyer. What does that mean?
We'll get more into that. But basically, it's about setting clear standards. Dr. Hardy himself went through multiple editors for his book. It's part of the process. You learn to filter better, faster.
Okay, that mindset shift is crucial. Which brings us to another big internal change needed for 10x. The difference between operating from needing versus wanting.
This is huge. Needing is extrinsic. It's driven by security, scarcity, fear. You're reacting to perceived obligations.
Like, I need to make more money, or I need to keep this client happy.
Exactly. Wanting, though, is intrinsic. It's driven by freedom, abundance, creativity. You're pulled towards something you genuinely desire.
And the book makes a radical point here. You don't need to justify your wants.
Not to anyone. You want it because you want it. That's really hard for many people to grasp because we're so programmed to chase needs, especially money, assuming everything is scarce.
But wealth isn't a fixed pie, is it? Paul Graham's example.
Yeah, the restored car example. You take a beat-up car, fix it up beautifully, you've created wealth. The world is one nice car richer. You didn't make anyone poorer. Wealth is created.
That abundance mindset is key. Now, the Coinbase example with Brian Armstrong. That's a fascinating and maybe controversial illustration of this wanting principle in a tough situation.
Definitely. It was 2020, a very turbulent time, socially and politically. Coinbase's internal culture got tense. Employees pushing for the company to take public stances.
And initially, Brian Armstrong kind of went along with it.
Yeah, he admitted he made a statement supporting BLM partly out of fear, feeling he needed to conform to what other tech companies were doing. A needing decision.
But then he corrected course.
He realized it was distracting from Coinbase's core mission, increasing economic freedom through crypto. So he put out a new statement, very clearly defining them as mission-focused. Quoting Stephen Covey, keep the main thing the main thing.
And then he made a really bold move.
Incredibly bold. He offered a generous severance package to anyone who wasn't fully aligned with that mission-first focus. About 5% of the company left.
Which caused backlash, right? Drama,
Right.
media hits.
Oh, yeah. But Armstrong said it was one of the best things for the company. They became fully aligned, moved faster, new hires knew exactly what they were signing up for. It was a huge leadership moment, born from choosing the mission, want over conformity, need, despite the fear.
It shows that shedding that 80% misaligned people, activities, mindsets, it won't always be popular, especially with those operating from need.
But everything you really want, the book argues, is on the other side of that fear.
Let's talk about P-Rod, Paul Rodriguez, the skateboarder. Another example of operating from want.
Amazing talent.
Yeah.
Chess prodigy, martial arts champ, legendary skater, never plateaued, got sponsored early.
And when Nike came knocking, a huge deal. He had a non-negotiable.
A signature shoe. That was his standard. He knew what he wanted, his value, and was fully prepared to walk away if Nike didn't meet that standard. He operated from want, not need.
He wasn't just happy to be there, he set the terms.
Exactly. He held his own standards, he was confident in his unique ability, and that led to this incredible 17-year collaboration, 10 signature shoes, millions sold. It went way beyond the initial plans because he was the buyer.
Okay, there's that word again, buyer. What defines a buyer versus a seller in this context?
Dan Sullivan defines a buyer as someone who uses their learning to constantly create higher standards for their future. They want to upgrade their present. They seek collaborators who resonate with that vision. They commit with courage.
At a seller.
A seller often operates from perceived need. They might sell themselves short, compromise on their vision, because they feel they need the deal or the approval.
So transformational relationships happen when everyone operates as a buyer. Everyone wins in the way they want.
Precisely. It becomes an infinite game. The goal isn't just to win once, but to keep playing, evolving, and growing together. No one feels like they're losing out.
This reframing is powerful. It even changes how we think about time itself, not just hours on the clock.
Right, the difference between Chronos and Kairos time?
Chronos that's regular time, right? Linear, fixed.
Yeah, Newtonian time,
Yeah.
a 9 to 5 factory model. Focus on effort, quantity, being busy is Chronos.
But Kairos, that's different.
That's qualitative time. Like Einstein's relativity applied to your experience. Your sense of time changes based on your progress. When you're making huge leaps, transforming, time feels like it expands or slows down. You achieve in a year what might normally take a decade.
Advancement is Kairos. That explains why prioritizing recovery is so vital for 10x.
Absolutely. Look at LeBron James spending millions on his body sleeping 8, 12 hours. His trainer insists recovery is paramount.
And the research confirms it, right? Unplugging leads to less fatigue, better health, more engagement, flow.
Better relationships, better mental health. It's a paradox. If you're never fully off, you're never fully on. Focus needs recovery. Contraction needs expansion.
Like Bill Gates and his Think Weeks. Totally unplugged to get big ideas.
Exactly. Disconnected, reading, thinking, reflecting. That fueled Microsoft's growth. Dan Sullivan says, tightly scheduled entrepreneurs cannot transform themselves. You need space.
So you need both modes. Explore and exploit.
Yes. Explore on free days, detached, open. Exploit on performance days, applying insights, executing. That's how you get decades of growth in a year.
And to manage this, the advice is limit daily objectives.
No more than 3 key personal objectives per day. Remember Eisenhower. The urgent are not important and the important are never urgent. Your 20%, your unique ability stuff, it's important but rarely feels urgent.
The 80% is always clamoring for attention. It's urgent.
So you have to consciously choose impact over busyness. Choose the important over the merely urgent.
That requires a different way of measuring success too, which brings us to the gap and the gain.
This is such a fundamental mindset shift. Most people live in the gap.
Meaning they measure themselves against some future ideal, some goal.
Exactly. Which means, by definition, you're always falling short, always chasing. It leads to feeling inadequate even when you're making progress. It's why high achievers can feel miserable.
So what's the alternative?
The gain. Embrace the gain.
Right.
Measure yourself backward. From where you are now, look back to where you started. Acknowledge the progress.
So instead of, I'm not at my goal yet, it's, wow, look how far I've come from where I was.
Precisely. It fosters intrinsic motivation. You learn to value the transformation itself. You take more from every experience, good or bad, seeing it as happening for you.
Dan Sullivan's client example illustrates this well, right? The one who saw no progress.
Yeah. Despite landing a huge client, starting key projects, he felt nothing positive happened because he was only focused on missed opportunities. The gap, being in the gain, means seeing and valuing the actual wins.
So 10x isn't about abandoning big dreams, but about being happy now, appreciating the progress while still stretching. It's how you measure.
Exactly. And every time you make a 10x leap, you are a different person. Your identity, your mental models, your unique ability, they all expand. You can look back at your own past jumps and see this pattern.
See the 80% you let go of, the 20% that remained and evolved?
Yeah, how you simplified and focused each time.
Okay, so a lot of this comes down to developing that unique ability and then creating a 10x culture. How do you hone that ability?
Josh Waitzkin talks about making smaller circles. It's about cultivating finer distinctions, a deeper, more granular understanding within your area of mastery.
Like the nuclear plant consultant. $1 for the X.
And $49,999 for knowing where to put the X. That's unique ability, producing disproportionate value.
The dream check exercise helps clarify this.
It's a great thought experiment. What would you need to do? What specific value would you need to provide to earn a massive check, say $10 million, from someone you deeply admire and want to collaborate with?
It forces you to think about being 10x better, more valuable, not just bigger.
Right. Or if money isn't the driver, pick a peak experience goal. What unique contribution gets you there?
And this applies to building organizations too. The USCCA example, Tim Schmidt.
Fantastic case study in building a sticky organization. Started with a magazine, $47 a year, linear growth, because he micromanaged.
Didn't trust others. Classic bottleneck.
Then the breakthrough. Realized he needed a world-class team. And crucially, added self-defense liability insurance as a core benefit. That made them unique. Education, training, legal prep, and insurance.
That was the unique value proposition, and then the 10x move.
He raised the price from $47 to $297. Massive jump.
Wow, did they lose customers?
Cut their client base in half. But the business made more than double the revenue, and it was way more profitable. Quality over quantity, laser focus on their niche, the fringes of the bell curve.
So what makes an organization like USCCA sticky? What are the elements?
The sources break it down. 1, a clear cause. People need to know what they're part of.
2, an ideology. A mission that gives you goosebumps, based on principles, not politics. USCCA apparently has lots of Democrat members because it's about self-defense principles.
3, a symbol. Strong name, professional logo people connect with. Even tattoo.
4, shared rituals. Consistent activities creating meaning and belonging, like showing their card at the annual expo.
5, the language. Insider words, acronyms, shared meanings, like who not how or gap and gain. Creates community.
And 6, the leader. Not a dictator, but an attractive servant character guiding members on their hero's journey. Tim Schmidt transformed himself to become that leader.
Inspiring trust and commitment. It's a whole ecosystem.
This ties into Dr. David Hawkins's map of consciousness too, doesn't it? The emotional levels.
Yeah, it maps emotional energy. Guilt at 30, fear 100, anger 150, then courage 200, acceptance 350, love 500, peace 600.
And most people barely move on that scale in a lifetime, stuck between fear and anger.
Over 80%, the sources say. Few are willing to change core beliefs. But courage, level 200, that's the entry point for real transformation. Going 10x fundamentally moves you up that scale.
And the ripple effect is incredible. 1% at optimism, 310, counterbalances 90,000 people at lower levels.
It's wild. The positive energy has a disproportionate impact. A 10x culture means everyone is transforming, raising the collective energy.
Dr. Hardy shares his own journey too, how his life changed dramatically.
Profoundly and qualitatively different, he says. Non-linear. Going from 0 to 5 kids rapidly, building a 7-figure company. But also shedding biases, distractions, even profitable but misaligned 80% parts of his business.
And his schedule now?
Slower, simpler, bigger blocks for creativity and recovery, living the principles.
There was one last quick example, the church mission, optimizing for the wrong thing.
Right. They were focused on dots, contacts made through things like door knocking. But 40% of actual baptisms came from working with existing members.
And the door-knocking conversion rate?
Terrible. Like 1% for baptisms.
Yeah.
A low-quality activity versus a high-quality one. It just reinforces. 10x is about higher quality, less quantity, focusing on what actually yields the result.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. This deep dive really shows how 10x isn't about more grinding. It's a qualitative shift.
It's about simplifying, focusing on your unique ability, leveraging who, not how, operating from want, using qualitative time, measuring in the gain.
Yeah.
It's a whole different way of being.
So for you listening, this offers a path to potentially huge results, not by working harder, but by thinking and operating differently, being better, being different, not just bigger or busier.
Yeah, it's a fundamental shift.
So the final thought to leave you with, consider your 80%, the activities, the relationships, maybe even the mindsets you're holding on to right now. What's that comfort zone preventing?
What truly impossible seeming 10x goal could actually become possible if you were willing to let go of that familiar 80% that got you here?
And commit to becoming the kind of person who could actually achieve it. Something to think about.